Hey, I'm Happiness Don, and today we're going to be building this. This right here is a shopping app, and I just came back from a local store, and this is what I used to shop. This is amazing because I built this with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can see right here the items I was able to purchase and the items I'm yet to purchase. You can see the total price also. We can add extra items, we can remove items, and this works offline. And this is installable. You think that's awesome? Wait till you hear this. This uses a database in the browser, not local storage, a database in the browser. So you can exit the app, come back to the app, reload, refresh. You're always going to see your data there unless you delete it. This is a real Android app with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I keep pushing the limits. You want to see how to build this? I'm sure you want to see how to build this. Come join me. I'll show you. Here's what we're going to be building. This is a shopping app, and we can add items to a shopping app. Let's say I want to purchase a table tissue, and I want 2 of this. So this is 2 right here in quantity, and each one of them costs $400. Add item, and look at that. The total price has been calculated to $800. That's 400 times 2, and we didn't add a price for face powder, so it goes to $0. We can decide to remove this, and let's say we want to try it again. So face powder, we want this time around it's cost $300, and we need about 5 of this. And add item, look at that. Now total price is $2,300. We can check an item, and we can reload our page for as many times as we want, turn off the internet, exit the app, come back to it. Our data is always going to be there. Our app is always going to work. Now we're going to be using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build this application. This is what it looks like on big screen, but our focus right now is making this work on your mobile phone. So you'll be able to install this application and use it just like any other application. To achieve that, we need a service worker to tell our browser, hey, these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files that you're loading right now, store them so that when next the user comes back to this website, just give them what you've already stored. You don't need to use the internet anymore. Give them what you've stored from your cache. And we're going to be using Workbox to generate a service worker. I'll show you how easy this is to do. You don't need to stress yourself or struggle to write the service worker yourself. We'll use Workbox, and we'll be able to easily generate this service worker. Now for offline data storage, we need IndexedDb, and you can come over to the application section of your console. That's the browser console. Then you're going to see this IndexedDb option right here on the storage. You click on it, and this is our database right now, the shopping app. And you can see the items we have so far. We have the one for the table tissue and then the face powder. So you can go check out this application right now. Go over to this URL, it's displayed on your screen, and you should be able to see this application. Try it out, use it, store something in the database, and on your computer you can right click, then inspect, and go back to the application section. You should see IndexedDb right there with the items. So that's the database we're going to be using for our application. Now, I know that IndexedDB can be complex to work with. In fact, I have a 3-hour course on JavaScript and IndexedDB in my YouTube channel. So you can go check out this course right now if you want to see how IndexedDB really works under the hood. But I know that's kind of complex. So we're going to be using Dexie.js, a minimalistic wrapper for IndexedDB, which is going to make working with IndexedDB very easy. Now, this course is part of a challenge in my dev community, New Dev. I'm going to tell you what you need to do at the end of this video. So because of that, I'm not going to be making this code base public immediately. I'll do that in the next 1 month. So if this video you're watching right now is already 1 month old, you should see the link in the description, and it's going to be public. But right now, I want everyone who's going to be doing this challenge to build this along with me so that you'll be able to complete the task I'm going to give to you at the end of this video. All right. I have my IDE WebStorm open. You can use any text editor or IDE you want. Create a folder, you can name it shopping app, and inside your folder you're going to need 3 files: an index.html file, index.css file, and an index.js file. Now inside of the index.html file, we already have a boilerplate code, and we'll need a title. So let's name this shopping app. Next, we're going to add the favicon, that icon you get to see on the nav bar when you open up a website. Let's add that here. So we're going to use a link, and well, so this is going to be icon instead of style sheet. And for href, what we're going to do is come over to the project section, and I'm going to paste a folder right here which contains the assets for our project. Now we have the same icon with 3 different sizes. Remember, I want to make this application work like any regular mobile app. So when a user installs the application, the mobile device is going to choose the best fit icon for the app. I'm going to leave a link to these 3 icons in the description of this video. So download it and you can add it to your shopping app. Now back to the index.html file, we add a link to the smallest icon right here. And we also want to add a link to the CSS file. We can drag the index.css file right here in WebStorm and we should have the link tag created for us. Remember to always do this in your links. So look at this. You have the dot and then the slash before the file name. With that, you're going to ensure that you're always getting the exact file you want from this location. Let's also add a link to the index.js file before the closing tag of the body. So you can drag the index.js file right inside of the HTML file and let's take that down to the body tag. Now let's indent this and remember dot and slash. Now let's start structuring our app. We're going to start by creating a div with class of container, and inside of our container I want a form tag which is going to contain the input field for our different items. Now let's give this form an ID of item form. We're going to use CSS to style all this later on. Inside of our form we need 3 input fields. Input fields for the name of the item, the quantity, and then the price. Let's wrap each of our input fields in a label tag. And we can go ahead and label each of the input fields. So we have name of item for the first input field, and we have quantity for the second input field. The type for the quantity should be number. We also have price for the third input field. And let's give the first input field an ID of name input, the second input field an ID of quantity input, and the third input field an ID of price input. Quantity is going to have a default value of 1, so the user can always change that if they want more than 1 of a particular item. And price is going to have a default value of 0. Now the name of the item is going to be required so that the user always has to input the name of the item in order for the form to submit. Let's see what our app looks like so far. Alright, we're getting somewhere. Now we'll also need to add a nav bar to our application. Let's do that with the nav tag. And we want to indent this. And inside of a navbar, let's just have a p tag for now with a text my list. Or we can now go ahead and add an empty line after each label so that our code looks more readable. Next, we need another div that displays the items, the different items that we've added to our item list. Let's give this div an ID of items div. Now I'm going to take you to the already completed app so we can see again what we're really building. Again, this is the live app. We have the name of the item, the quantity, the price, and we also have the add item button. Let's add that right away. Before we close the form tag, let's have a button tag right here on line 33, and we'll give this a submit type. We also want to give it an ID named add item button. And inside of our button, we have the text add item. Now, back to our live app, we want to structure the items div next. We're also going to be adding a div for the total price. Each item in the items div is going to have a class named item. And each of the item has a checkbox, the item info which contains the item name, the quantity and price, and a delete button. Let's add that now. We have the checkbox right here with class of checkbox. We're going to be using CSS to style this later on. And this is either going to be checked or not checked. Right here, WebStorm is telling us that the input field is missing an associated label. Let's just have this for now. We also need a div for the item info. So let's create a div with class item info. We have a p tag with the item name right here and another p tag with the price times the quantity. Finally, we need the delete button. And we have X for our delete button. Next, let's create another div for the total price. We're going to give this an ID of total price div. Now we need all these IDs to be able to work with our HTML elements from the JavaScript code. Alright, looking good. Now let's go back to the index.css file and style our application. Inside of the CSS file, the first thing we want to do is unset the default margin and pattern. Since this is a mobile first app, it's good we remove the default margin and pattern so that our application can fill the whole screen. Now we need to set a background for the body, and we also need to style the nav. Right here, we're giving a nav by a green background, a height of 3 rem, a line height of 3 rem, and that's going to center the text inside of the nav bar. We're also giving the text a white color and we're adding padding left and margin bottom. Let's save this and see what we have. All right, now we need to style a container div. We're just going to give it a padding of 1 rem. Next, let's style each of the labels and then the input field. Okay, looking good. We also want to style the quantity input and then the price input so that they'll look smaller than the input for the name of the item. Next, we'll add styling for the add item button, and here we're unsetting the default border. We're giving it a background, a color, and padding of 0.5 rem. Let's style the items div. We'll give it a margin top of 3 rem and a margin bottom of 2 rem. We're also going to add styling for the item class, and that's going to represent each of the items. Here we're giving it a grid display, a grid template columns of 1fr, 2fr, and 1fr, a background, and then a margin bottom. Now, line 52 just means that our CSS is going to divide each item div into 3 columns. And the middle column, which is 2fr, is going to be bigger than the left column and the right column, which are 1fr. fr is a fractional unit. Let's also style the checkbox class. We'll add styling for the item info, and we want to align this fruit juice text and the $5 times 3 text to the center. We're also going to add styling for the delete button. On line 67, we have margin as 000 auto, and that's going to push it to the right edge. We're also unsetting the default border. We're giving it a red background, a white color, we're styling the font size, the width, and the height. Let's also add a pseudo class for the delete button so that when user clicks on it, something happens. Now, what we're saying is that when user clicks on this delete button, move it down a bit so that they feel like they're clicking on something. Now, we're going to have another class for representing the purchased item. Back to our live URL, you see that the purchased item is different from the not purchased item. The purchased item has a green background and the text is crossed out. Let's add the purchase class right here. We're giving it a green background and a white color. We also want to style the p tag inside of the purchase class. So that's representing each of the text. And we're going to cross out the purchased item. Alright, to test out our purchase class, let's go back to the index.html file, and we're going to duplicate this item div so that we have 2 items, and let's give the second item div the purchase class. So the first item div is not purchased and the second item div has the purchase class. Now let's save this and back to a browser. Look what we have right here, the not purchased item and then the purchased item. On line 55, you can see right here that the checkbox is checked by default. And we're going to be using JavaScript to tell a browser when to use the checked attribute and when not to use the checked attribute for each of the items. Now, that's it for structuring and styling a shopping app. We can now go over to the index.js file and write the JavaScript code. To start working on our JavaScript code, we'll need Dexie for storage. Now, there are different ways to get started with Dexie. You can just copy and paste this script tag right inside of your index.html file, and that's all. You can start using Dexie right away. But this is a CDN link. And if we do this with our application, our service worker is not going to be able to tell our browser to cache this file because it's a CDN link. If we want to use Dexie.js offline in an application, we need to download the JavaScript file. Now go over to the Dexie docs and scroll down to the download button. Click on it and look at what we have right here. We have Dexie.js, Dexie.min.js, Dexie.min.js.map, and Dexie.d.ts. What we need to download for our app is Dexie.min.js. That's the minified version of Dexie. So you click on Dexie.min.js and this is what we have right now. The code is not easy to understand because it's been minified. And that's why there's the Dexie.min.js.map. That file is to help us understand Dexie.min.js when debugging, but we don't need that right now. So back to the Dexie.min.js file, let's right click inside of this page. You want to do this in any of this white space instead of right inside of the text. Inside of the white space, you right click and you should see the save as option. Now you can save this inside of your shopping app project folder. With that saved, we can come back to our index.html file and add a script tag for Dexie.min.js just before we close the head tag. Back to our index.js file, the first thing we want to do is create a new IndexedDb database with Dexie. So we have new Dexie right here and the name of our database. Let's name our database shopping app. The next thing we're going to do is define the structure of a database. And for that, we have db.version and one right here. I'm going to explain that in a bit. And we have .stores. And inside of the stores method, we have an object. Remember, if you really want to understand how IndexedDb works under the hood, check out my Instagram course with IndexedDb. I explained everything in detail. Now for each item in a database, we're going to have an ID plus plus before the ID. Having plus plus before the ID means that Dex is going to help us auto generate the ID for each item. So we have ID, we have name, we have price, and we have the status is purchased. So is purchased is either going to be true or false. Now, anytime we want to change the structure of a database, if we say maybe we don't want name, we want description. After we've created a database, in order to change the structure of our database, we need to increase the DB version. So if we try to change the structure of our database without modifying the DB version, that's going to return an error. So we need to increase the DB version, not reduce. It has to always be higher. So if it was version 1 before, it has to be version 2. And if it's version 2, it has to be version 3 in order to modify the structure of the database. Now back to version 1, and we want this as name. Next, let's get the item form with the document.getElementById method. We also need the items div, and we'll need the total price div. Now let's make our add items form work, so that when we add a new item right here, input quantity and price, click on the add item button, we can see our item right inside of our HTML page. Inside of the index.js file, we're going to add an onSubmit event listener for the items form. And since we're going to be using Dexie inside of this event listener, it has to be an async function. So we're creating an arrow function right here. And the first thing we want to do is prevent the default reload behavior. Now, when the user clicks on the submit button, we need to get the value of the name. So that's the name of the item. Let's do that with the getElementById method. And right here we have name input. Remember, this is the ID we gave to the name input field. Back to the index.js file, we have .value for the name input. We also want to get the quantity right here on line 12. And this is quantity input. And again, .value. Let's also get the price on line 13. And this is price input and .value. Now that we have the name, quantity, and price, to add this item to our database, we use the await keyword and then db, which is the db we created on line 1. And we have to say .items, which is the item object right here on line 2, and .add. We have a parenthesis right here and the object we want to add to the database. So this is name, quantity, and price. Now this is the same thing as saying name is equal to name, and quantity is quantity, and price is price. The short form of this is just write a name, quantity, and price, since it's exactly the same thing. And finally, what we want to do on line 17 is say item form.reset. That's going to clear the form each time we add an item to the database. Now let's go test this out in Chrome. So inside of the index.html file, I want to open this with Chrome and right click to inspect. Next, we click on this icon right here at the top and go over to application and then IndexedDb. Now let's try adding an item to the database. So let's write bread right here, and quantity as 2 and price is $500. Add item. And look at that. Dexie has helped us create the shopping app database right here, and you can click on it and we have a database. Now open up the shopping app database. You can see the items object store, click on it, and this is the first item we have right here. Name as bread, ID, quantity, and price. We can try adding another item to the database, and let's name this table tissue. We need 2 of this, and price for this should be $3.50. Add item. And what we want to do right now to see the new item we just added is click on this refresh button. And when we click on the refresh button, we should see a new item. So that's the table tissue, and we have the ID, name, price, and quantity. Alright, that's for adding an item to the database. Now, how do we use that item which we've added to the database? What we're going to do next is create a populate items div function. And a function's job is going to be to fetch the items from the database and then populate the items div with those items. Now on line 8, let's create a new function named populate items div. and this is going to be an async function because we're going to be using Dexie inside of it. To get all the items in a database, on line 9 right here, all we need to do is create a variable named all items, and this is going to be equal to await db.items.toArray, and that gets all the items in the database. Now, whenever we fetch the data from our database, it's always going to come in the order oldest to newest. So we added bread first. We have bread as the first item, and then we have table tissue as the second item. But in our application, we want the new item to always come first. So instead of bread before table tissue, we want table tissue before bread. And if we add a new item named maybe face powder, we have face powder before table tissue and table tissue before bread. So right here on line 9, I want to do db.items.reverse first of all, before converting this to an array and fetching it for us. Now on line 11, we want to add this to the items div.innerHTML property, and this is equal to the all items which we have on line 9 dot map, and right here for each item inside of the all items array, give us this. So here's what we're doing. For each item inside of the all items array, this array is going to contain an object of all the different items. Let's say this is the first object, which has name as table tissue and quantity as 5 and price as 70. And here's what the second object can contain: name as bread, quantity as 7, and price as 400. We're also going to have the is purchase status, so that's either going to be true or false, and we have is purchased for the second item, and this can be true or false. So now for each object right here, give us this from line 26. We can now remove line 23 to line 10 and see the code in action. So right now we're going to come back to the index.html file and copy what we already have for each item right here. So from line 55 to line 66, we're going to copy this and go back to the index.js file, and we're going to be generating this code for each of the item inside of the all items array. Let's use JavaScript to modify line 12. An item should only have the class of purchased if the is purchased status is true. So right here on line 12, we're going to use the template literal. We're going to write item.isPurchased. So if the item is purchased, then give us the purchase class. On line 14, we also want to do the same thing for the checked attribute. So let's break this down. Right here on line 17, you only give us the checked attribute if the item has been purchased. So item right here dot is purchased and the checked attribute. Next, for item info, instead of the text produced, we have the template literal here and item dot name. On line 23, we have the symbol $, which is going to come before the price of the item, and we also have the template literal again and item dot price. So we have the first $, which is the symbol, and then we have the template literal, item.price times the template literal again and item.quantity. Now the next thing we want to do is add the total price div right here on line 68. So back to the index.js file, we're going to calculate the total price. Let's have const array of prices, and for each item in the all items array, each item right here, we have item.price times the item.quantity. And here's what's happening on line 30. We're using the map method to return an array of all of the items, but each item has a quantity. So if the price of the item is $50 and then the quantity is maybe 5, so that's 50 times 5, which is 250, and that's for that particular item. And then for the next item and the next item and the next item. Now to get the total price, we're going to add up all the values in the array of prices variable. So this is const total price is equal to array of prices dot reduce. So we use the reduce method for this, and inside of the reduce method we have a, b, and that's going to return a plus b, then a default value of 0. So this is an easy way to add up all the values in an array in JavaScript. And if the array is empty, give us a default value 0. Now that we have the total price, let's put this inside of the total price div. So this is total price div.inner text, and that's equal to total price and then the dollar symbol plus the total price. So this is going to concatenate this string with this variable. So that's going to be total price and then the dollar symbol, then the value of total price, which can be 250, 500, and so on. Now let's go back to the index.html file, and we can now remove the default items we have right here. So let's clear this, and we have items div and then the total price div. So let's move this to a separate location. We're going to remove the default value right there, and same thing for the items div. So line 41 and 42, the items div and then the total price div. Now if we go back to our browser, our items div is going to be empty, and that's because we've not added this to the items div just yet. So what we're going to do next is call this populate div function when the window loads up. So right here we have window.onload, and then that's equal to the populate div function. So populate items div, and this is just going to be the function. So when the window loads up, then give us the populate items div function. Just write the items div function right there on line 36. Now we can save this, go back to application, and we can try adding an item. So bread, quantity as 3, price as 70, add item, and we also want to add a different item now. Let's add the table tissue, quantity as 5, price as 80, we add item, and then we reload our page, and look at that. So unload the populate items div function is running, and we have the total price right there at $610. Awesome. This has been good so far. By the way, if you've not hit the subscribe button already or shared this video, why? Please tell me why. Alright, let's see how we can immediately show an item in the items div whenever the user hits the add item button without having to reload the page. So right now we need to reload the page to see the new data. Back to our code base, we'll go back to the onSubmit event listener. That's the add item function, and right here on line 45, just after we've added the item to the database, we're going to run this populate items div function again. So populate items div function, and our populate items div function is going to take the data from the database, that's including the new data, and then populate the items div. So let's save this and let's go try again. Right here we have biscuit and quantity as 3 and price as 70. Add item, and look at that. Right there we have biscuit right there. And the total price is also being updated immediately. So total price right now is $1,270. Now, if you look closely, you're going to see a comma before each box, and that's because we're using the map method to populate the items div. So this map method is returning an array of the div elements and separating each of the div element with a comma. So that comma is showing up in our shopping app. Now let's go back to the code base, and how we're going to fix that is come over to line 28. Right here we want to do .join, and that's going to merge all the div items in the array and remove all the commas. Let's save this and go try again. So look at that, the commas are all gone. Nice. Now let's see how we can update data in our IndexedDb database using Dexie. For that, we're going to add the mark as purchased functionality. So right now, when we mark an item as purchased, it doesn't really do anything. We're just checking the checkbox, because when we reload, it's all gone. So right now, we're going to update the database so that when we mark an item as purchased, it's going to be updated in the database, and then the is purchased property is going to change to true. Now back to our code base. What we're going to do is create a function named toggle item status, and this is going to be an async function. Our function is going to expect the event handler and ID. Now we're going to use this event to get the value of the checkbox. So when user hits the checkbox, we're going to use that event parameter to know whether the checkbox is checked or unchecked. Now back to our code base, we have await db.items.update, and this is how to update data in the database. And then we have the ID as the first argument, and an object with the property we want to update as the second argument. Now want to update is purchased. This is going to be equal to not event.target.checked. Now, what this simply means is that event.target.checked for this checkbox is going to be either true or false. So right now, event.target.checked is true for biscuits, and event.target.checked for egg is false, and event.target.checked for table tissue is true. So on line 52, we're saying if event.target.checked is true, make it false, and if event.target.checked is false, make it true. Now, after we've updated the database, what do we do next? We populate the items div with the new data. Now let's go over to our populate items div function and see how we can use the toggle item status method, which we just created. We want to do that in the checkbox input field. So right on line 17, we have the onChange event listener, and then toggle item status with event as the first argument and item.id as the second argument. So event, then the item ID, and right in our toggle item status, we're using that event.target.checked and then the item ID. Now let's save this and go back to our browser. To test this out, we're going to try to complete the third item, which is the table tissue. So click on the checkbox and look at that. Look at that. The class has changed also. We can reload, and this is always going to be the same. We check the biscuit, check the egg, check the bread, reload, and it's always going to be the same. And that's it for the toggle item status. Now let's see how we can delete data from the database. To do this, we create a new function named remove item, and this is going to be an async function. Our function is going to expect an ID argument, and what we're going to do on line 58 is say await db.items.delete, and then the ID of the item which we want to delete. So ID right here, and then remember await populate the items div with the new items data from the database. Let's go over to a button in the populate items div function and use this remove items function which we just created. So what we want to do on line 27 is say on click, call the remove item function and pass the item ID as its argument. So item.id right here on line 27. And that's it. We save this, go back to a browser, and let's try removing the table tissue. Look at it right there, and the price is also updated immediately. Let's try removing the biscuit, and we're left with just the egg and the bread. Reload our page, and the data is still right there. We mark the bread as purchased, and we can try to add a new item. So let's add the table tissue back. We really need this table tissue, and we need 3 of this table tissue, and we need the price is increased by now to $500. We add the item, and that's it right there, the table tissue. The total price is now $2,160. Amazing. Now let's see how to make this work offline. To get our app to work offline, we need to generate a service worker with the Workbox CLI. So firstly, run the command npm install Workbox CLI -- global on your terminal. I've already done that, so the next thing we want to do is run the Workbox wizard. So let's copy this and go over to a terminal, paste this, and this should ask us a couple of questions. What's the root of your web app? Which directory do you deploy? And the default selection for us here is assets, because that's the only folder we have in a web app. But this is not what we want. We want the root folder, the shopping app folder, instead of the assets folder. So back to a terminal. What we're going to do here is go over to the manually enter path selection, hit enter, and hit / right here in the option of entering the path to the root of your web app. Now, which file types would you like to pre-cache? Let's pre-cache everything. PNG, JS, CSS, HTML, that's fine. Where would you like your service worker file to be saved? sw.js in the root folder, yes. And where would you like to save these configuration options? So that's workbox-config.js. For this next question, we have no as an answer, and our Workbox config has been successfully created. You can see it right here in our project explorer, workbox config.js file. Now we're going to use this workbox config.js file to generate the service worker. To do that, run the command workbox generate sw workbox-config.js. Here's what it looks like in full screen. Now let's run this on our terminal, and we have a service worker successfully generated for us. Right here we have sw.js for a service worker. Now if you open the service worker file, it's going to contain code you don't understand. And you don't need to understand this, because Workbox is going to do the work of generating the service worker file. And if we need to do extra configuration, we can do that right here in the workbox config.js file. Now the next thing we want to do is add the service worker script in our index.html file. So just before we close the head tag, let's paste the script we just copied, and we can go ahead and remove these comments. So line 12, we're going to remove this, and line 13, we're going to remove this. Now here's what the script is saying. If the browser supports a service worker, so if service worker is navigator, then when the page loads up, register this service worker. So right now we're trying to register service worker.js, but our service worker file is named sw.js. So what we want to do instead is convert to line 14 and write sw.js. Remember, always have the dot before the slash. Now let's save a file and come back to a browser. Right inside of the application window, we can see service workers right here as the second option after manifest. Click service worker and look at what we have right here. Our service worker for the shopping app is activated and is running. Now it's going to be difficult to test this out if your application is not running on a server. So let's just go straight to deploying on GitHub pages, and that's going to be very fast and easy. We'll go over to GitHub and look, that's my profile. Username Ebenezer, so give me a follow on GitHub. You also see the link in the description of this video. Now we hit the plus button and new repository. We're going to name our repository shopping app. And look at that, I already have a repository named shopping app, so I'm going to use just 1p for a shopping. And then you can add a description, make this private or public, and create a repository. So right here we have a shopping app. To push this existing repository, we're going to copy this code and back to a terminal, run the command git init to initialize a git repository right here, and then we're going to paste the code we just copied. Oh, you can see that we have an error right here, and that's because we've not made any commit yet. So let's make a commit. I'm doing this from the terminal so that everyone can follow, but it's very easy to do this with WebStorm using the commit functionality, and then you can switch branches, create new branches easily right here. But back to a terminal, we can do git add to stage all the changes, and then git commit -m. Let's just write build project for now. But if you're building this, it's good you make the commit while you build, so you don't just commit everything at once. And that's it. We've made our commit. Now let's push our main branch. And look at that. We can go back to our GitHub repository, reload our page, and we should see what we just pushed. All right, now to host our application, let's click on this ... button right here and settings. Next, we'll scroll down to pages, and right here in pages we have source as the main branch. Save this, and that's all we need to do to host our application. We're gonna wait for like 30 seconds and then click on this link for our published site. And look at that, we have our application right here. This is our published application on GitHub pages. Now let's see if our service worker is working. So back to application and to service workers. Right here we have our service workers activated and is running. Let's click this offline checkbox and reload our page. Look at it right there, our page works offline. So this is how we're able to simulate the offline connectivity. You can also turn off your computer's Wi-Fi to be sure, then reload the page, and right there we have a service worker working for us and our application works offline. But we're not done yet, because right now our application works offline. You can open this on your mobile phone, but there's a little problem, and that's that you're not gonna get the install prompt the same way you would if you went to my own live URL right now. So ebenezer.github.io/shopping app, you get the install prompt and you're able to install the application in your mobile phone. Now in order to fix that, we need to add a manifest.json file to our application. Back to our code base, and in our shopping app folder, let's create a new file named manifest.json. Now adding this manifest.json file means that we're ready to make our application an installable PWA. This is what we're going to use to describe the application. So right here you can see we have name as shopping app, we have the short name as shopping app. You can decide to name this something else or just shop. Short name as shopping app. Then the icons, remember the icons we have right here in the assets folder. So we have the icons for the different sizes: 192 times 192, 384 times 384, and 512 times 512. Then we also set the theme color. Right now it's #FFFFFF for white. The background color, the start URL. So this is very important. Your start URL has to be /shopping app if you're hosting with GitHub pages. So instead of just / right here, you need slash shopping app slash. That's the name of your repository and then slash. If you don't do this, your manifest.json file is going to tell your browsers that this is the start URL. But really, this is not the start URL of our application. So with GitHub pages, we have your username.github.io, then slash the name of your repository. That should be the start URL. And then we have orientation as portrait. And that is for manifest.json file. The next thing we want to do is go over to the index.html file and import this manifest.json file. So right here on line 9, we have link rel manifest, and then the href is ./manifest.json. Now that we have a manifest.json file, we can make a commit right here in WebStorm. And right here, we can say add manifest.json file as the commit message, commit and push. And we want to push this to GitHub pages. Now, if we go back to our hosted app and reload to test this, we're going to encounter a problem. And that's that whatever change we make right now is not going to take effect in our hosted app. This is because a service worker has already told the browser to cache the files we loaded initially. So whenever we open up our application, our browser is always going to keep giving us the cached files. So this can be very confusing at first. If you convert to your index.css file, for example, and then change the nav backgrounds to red instead of green, make your commit right here and push. Then back to the hosted app, you reload your page. You can see that that change is not taking effect. So a service worker is going to keep giving us the initial files it stored. If you want your change to always reflect whenever you push, you will need extra configuration and code, which I'm going to have to cover in another video. Let me know if you want to see that in the comment section below. But right now, if you want to see the changes you just pushed, you'll have to come over to the URL, click on this lock icon, and then go over to cookies. Right here, we have the cookies for done.github.io. Remove, done, and reload. Now, this is showing you no internet, which can also be very confusing. To fix this, go over to the network tab, and right here we have throttling selected as offline. So click no throttling. I'm making sure I encounter all the problem in this video so you don't get stuck and confused. So reload right now. Look at that. We have my lists with the red background. All right, and here's how to easily do it on your mobile phone as well. Now let's go back to our code base, and we can now change this background back to green, commit and push again, and do the same thing to have your changes reflect. And that's it for building a shopping app. It works on mobile, it's installable, it's a progressive web app, it's amazing. Now time for the challenge. All right, for the challenge, the first thing you want to do is be careful with the last point we just raised about the service worker always giving us the old files. So you have to make sure you're done with your application. You've made all those changes you want to possibly make before submitting it. I'm going to give you a list of things to do. I'll also share them in a Slack workspace. So you have to be sure that you're done with all the tasks, you're done with your implementation before submitting it, because once anyone opens up your app, it's always going to be that way. So you're not going to do any last minute change for us. Once we open up your application, that's how it's going to be forever, unless we have to manually go and start clearing the cookie. You're not going to submit your challenge and then see someone else's challenge and try to copy them. And you want to push the application again to your GitHub repository and rehost a new implementation. Once we open up your app, that's how it's going to be forever. So make sure you're done before you submit the challenge. Now, these are the things I want you to do. First, you're going to add an edit functionality. The user should be able to update the price, update the quantity, and update the name of the item. You're going to add a clear all functionality, so there should be a button for clearing all items. When I click on that button, all the items in the database are going to be cleared, and that's also going to be updated in the UI. Next, you're going to update the design. So everybody's shopping app has to look different. Your app can't look like mine can't look like yours. Nobody's shopping app should look the same. So update the design and make it look really good. But before you do that, make sure you completed the application's functionality, because if you don't complete the functionality and if you don't do the functionality well, you won't even be able to get to the stage of deciding from the design. Another thing I want you to have at the back of your mind while you're doing this is that you shouldn't do this because you want to win. Do this because you want to learn. That's the whole point of me doing this in the first place. I want to teach you. I want to push you beyond and above your limits. I want you to really learn. So do this because you want to learn, because this knowledge right now, you can use this and generate a lot more money than the price that this challenge comes with. So do this because you want to learn, not because you're going to win anything. Don't have that in mind. Just do this because you want to learn. All right, so that's it. See you in my next video and in the Slack workspace.